Oh, Kiri, and that is Mr. Anita Baker in the middle, Sweet Love, and the Four Seasons, Who Loves You? Well, it's 28 past 9, and it's that time of the week. Here we go, folks. Oh, Matthew, we faded this morning. I don't know why we faded, but we faded.
I sound a bit droopy there this
Yes,
morning,
you did
Richard.
actually. Do you want to have another go?
No,
We'd be right. Okay. All right. Oh, look, I mentioned earlier this morning that you're going to be here, and the Donald Trump story is a classic, a dead set classic. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. I mean,
this is the so-called cybersecurity
advisor
for Donald Trump,
yeah.
and you just think they'd do a few things right. You get a few basics right, hopefully, and Rudy Giuliani, who is his lawyer, his personal lawyer, the informal cybersecurity advisor, locked his iPhone out to the point where he couldn't get back into it. Now, most people that have used a modern smartphone realise that if you lock it and you keep putting the unlock code in incorrectly, it'll keep locking you out for longer and longer. It starts off with a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. He locked it out where at the point it was locked out for years. And so he didn't know what to do about it. So rather than go along to some of the IT experts that I'm sure they would have in the White House, he just rocked it up to an Apple store and said, "Oh, look, I've locked my phone out. Could you have a bit of a look at it for me?" So he's handed over a phone to a young employee that he had no idea who it was. They're always worried about Russian spies. They're worried about what might be happening. So just handed over to some random person in an Apple store. That person took his phone out the back, and in the end, they had to completely reset the phone to be able to get it back from being locked, and gave him back his clean, fresh phone with a backup that came out of iCloud. So just all these red flags going off as to things you shouldn't do in cybersecurity. And here's a guy advising Trump on cybersecurity, doing all these things. So just hilarious.
It is hilarious. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I just thought, wow, here he is. Yeah, cybersecurity, the whole thing, and got his phone locked out. He takes it to an Apple store, and
I'm surprised he wasn't.
I mean, it's in a cloud, so anybody can look at the cloud.
Well, someone could possibly get into there, but I'm surprised he didn't have a sticker on his phone with his pin written on that sticker so he doesn't forget it next time.
Oh, on it goes, really and truly. It's a laugh. Mate, Murdoch University, I love this SimLab thing. Tell us about the teacher.
Yeah, it's a bit sad actually that this is where it's at. I mean, teachers now, and you remember from the time that you spent in schools, teachers used to go through a process where they'd learn in the classroom environment, the lecture hall environment, about the subjects they were going to teach and how to deal with students, and then they'd go out as a prac teacher in the real world and get some experience there. But it's at the point now that dealing with parents is such a major part of being a teacher that Murdoch University is...
Try school counsellor as well.
Well, exactly right, yeah. So you've got now where Murdoch University has set up a simulator where they sit down in front of a computer screen and then they get abused, essentially, by a parent because their child in the simulated world has been suspended. So they get this abuse, this torrent of abuse from a teacher, and then they shut the sim down and then they sit down and talk about the experience and see how they would cope with it, how they would deal with it, because they know that these teachers are going to have this happen in the real world. So it's a bit of a sad reflection on what's happening in for poor old teachers. But what I love about this is that they're getting this simulation. They get more exposure in this simulated experience than they would in a 6-week prac, for example, they might have. And you're probably not going to put a prac teacher into that environment where you're throwing them in to start talk to parents after they've been there for a couple of days. So I think the simulator is a great way to get that experience, just a sad reflection on society.
Yeah, I've got to remember the day that the boss at one particular school passed the irate parent over to the school counsellor. You're the psychologist, you deal with this one. And it was a bit hard because the parent was a lady and she was in her pyjamas.
Yeah, right.
In the tracky dacks and the pyjama top.
Yeah.
At 9:30 in the morning. Hello.
Well, maybe you should suggest to Murdoch that they should have the parents coming in their pyjamas in the simulator.
I couldn't believe it. And had the Uggies on, the whole thing.
Yeah, right.
Oh.
Nothing wrong with Uggies, Richard.
No, but I didn't know where to look. Oh, gee. And she was irate too, and tempted to smoke in my office. Well, she got a short shift there. I'll give you the tip. Anyway, it's just awful, the whole thing. But it's good.
Yeah, I think the simulator concept is
I've got to say, though, a young teacher like that, and prac teachers, if anything happened like that, there would be a senior teacher with that person. Yeah. That they couldn't be by themselves.
No, that's exactly right. But the simulator gives them experience because at some point they're going to be by themselves and they might get that. Yeah. Well, They won't, not might get it, they will get it.
They will get it, and they'll get it in the supermarket, or they'll get it in the street, or they'll get it in a knock on the front door at night.
Yeah.
All that sort of thing. And that's, people forget those sort of things that happen to teachers, but it does happen. All right, let's get away from that. And, in a century ago, a tiny military-funded experiment changed the world.
Yeah, half a century ago.
Half a century, what did I say?
You said a century, but that's fine. What's
50 years ago, okay, it's half a century, but the bloke trying to send a message to another bloke.
Yeah, so this was
and it didn't work the first time.
It didn't, it must have been a flag there somewhere.
Oh.
So one of the problems that people had over 50 years ago when they were dealing with their computer systems is there were so many different types of protocols that were used in their computer systems. And if you wanted to connect your computer system to the outside world, you had to have a very expensive, what was called a leased line. Your telecommunication provider gave you a leased line and charged you a lot of money for it. And so a couple of people at two universities worked on a system where they could have different systems talking to each other. And so they decided that they'd work on a protocol, they'd send a message, and that first message that went was meant to send the word login. It got to LO and then crashed. So maybe that was an indicator.
Yeah.
They finally got it up and going again. An hour later, they sent the word login from one computer system to another computer system at another university, at Stanford University, 500 kilometres away. So that was the beginning, the birth, if you like, of the internet.
The internet.
That's right. So 50 years ago, you can say that. Now, it did start off as a way for universities to communicate. And we say that officially the internet came to Australia in 1989, so it's 50 years old across the world, 30 years old in Australia. But again, that first connection in Australia was used to connect a university in Australia to a university overseas. So it really wasn't what we experience today. But that same protocol, the same concept that was used to talk to or have different computer systems talking to each other was where the internet started to grow, and more people started to realise that this university thing seemed like it could be used out in the real world. So that's why you can have a Mac computer or a Windows-based computer or different versions of Windows or a Linux-based computer. A whole range of different computers can all communicate on this wonderful World Wide Web that we use.
I remember my first internet message somewhere in the 90s, early 90s it was, and I was given Arthur from Computer Research and Technology gave me a laptop. It was about that thick, and it was like, anyway, for those who are watching on camera, it was like that, because we're on camera at the moment. And I sent my first internet message across the room to Arthur, one desk to another, and didn't look back. And I still remember getting this fantastic program in there later called Windows 95.
Well, interesting, even back in the early 90s, I know computer systems were setting up for clients back in the early 90s. You didn't have the instant connection like you've got now. You didn't expect a message to get there instantly. We had systems, and it was a reasonable thing to do, where it was set up to dial up the internet.
That's right.
Twice a day to collect your email. So you do it at about 9 o'clock in the morning, and then usually about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So you'd sit there working away blissfully and aware of all these messages you might be receiving, one or two of them maybe, and then at 4 o'clock your server would automatically dial up and collect me. Oh, look at this. 3 or 4 messages popped up at 4 o'clock. I wonder why they all came at that time. It's because the internet was so expensive to connect to that you only dialed up twice a day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was that. And I remember also receiving very, very early on a lot of porn. and it wasn't regulated in those days. And some of the porn was, there was the children there, the whole thing. It was really quite awful.
Yeah.
And I remember Mark Rugendijk at Priceline Pharmacy commenting about it too, because he and I used to discuss internet, because I think we're the only two people in town, apart from Arthur, that had it on, and you that had it on in town anyway.
Yeah,
but
right.
the porn was dreadful.
Yeah.
Absolutely dreadful.
Yeah.
Moving right along. Okay. By the way, that first laptop I had a memory of 15 megabytes.
Yeah, incredible how things have changed.
Oh, 15 megabytes. Wow, that's big.
Yeah.
Okay, the new MG Z5. Now, I saw something about that in one of the weekend papers.
Yeah.
Nice car.
So what I love about this, and MG, I mean, it's now essentially owned by a Chinese company. It's owned by a British company, but that British company is owned by a Chinese company, so it's a Chinese company. But I used to love the old MGs when I was growing up, and I'd see these beautiful little sports cars and the spoked mag wheels. I used to see that. I love those. And it had a nice throaty sound of whatever engine they had. I don't know what sort of engines they had, but they're now at the point where the MG that will come out in Australia next year will be the cheapest electric car available in Australia. So they're slowly getting down. They're still a bit expensive, but they're slowly getting down. So that's around the $48,000 mark. And we've got a few models that are underneath $50,000 now. A Hyundai, I've got one. So we've got a few around that, and a few just sneaking up over the 50 grand mark. I think the Nissan Leaf, once you get it on road, is just over 50 grand. So people that see a Tesla, for example, go, wow, I'd love one of those, too expensive, I'll dismiss electric cars. Well, don't do that, because there's a range of electric cars out there now. And the new MG that's coming out, again, I love the fact that cars we associate from the past as being wonderful sports cars, sounding beautiful, are now going to an electric future. And that's where they see their future. That's a really important thing here, is that these companies that have been traditional sports car manufacturers are saying this is where our future is in electric.
Maserati, Mercedes-Benz, yep, they're all doing it.
All doing it. See, Maserati, a classic example there. They've relied on Ferrari engines all these years, beautiful V8 Ferrari engines, V12 Ferrari engines. And again, you've got that feel, that real, classic feel of a Ferrari engine in your Maserati. Well, they're moving away from that as well, and they're going to a complete lineup by the year 2021, maybe 22. Their lineup will be entirely electric. They're going electric hybrid to begin with, and then entirely electric by there. Yeah. So it's a changing world.
Matt, we could chat all day about that. Thanks for coming in. We'll see you next Wednesday for Tech Talk. And thank you very much also for allowing Access Technology to be one of our pickup points for the Salvation Army. We are doing, as you know, the collection this year for the Salvation Army, for the toys and the non-perishable food for Christmas hampers. And Access Technology is one of the pickup points. So thanks, mate, for that.
No, my pleasure.
Really appreciate it. We really do.
Happy to help.
Okay, it's coming up to 20 to 10, DCFM 88.9.